How are we doing? This is an interesting module because this module, both consumer behavior / buyer behavior, consumer behavior, B2C, and buyer behavior, B2B. Seems weird that I have it that way. Okay, I'm sorry for the confusion. I'm even confusing myself. That said, consumer behavior, B2C, and buyer behavior, B2B, this is an essential part of my definition of marketing. When we talk about marketing, my definition is find out what people want and give it to them. The finding out is marketing research. What people want is behavior. We're going to do that right now. And give it to them. This is STP via the 4 Ps and marketing strategy. Okay? So we're going to do B2C, consumer first. And when we talk about the consumer decision process, right, we talk about need recognition, information search, evaluating alternatives, purchase, and post-purchase behavior. All right, we're going to walk through all 5 of these steps, and then we're going to also talk about influences on each of these particular steps. So first, there are some kind of a need recognition. You know, I need an insulated cup because I like to sit in my office and record videos all day. And for Father's Day, I got this very cool Yeti cup. And if you put ice in it, it lasts the whole day. This is very much a functional need. I need cold water the whole day that lasts the whole day without me having to go downstairs the whole time. I would call this a functional need. There are functional needs and there are psychological needs. Psychological needs are more, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel more comfortable. You know, you could talk about functional as utilitarian and psychological more as luxury. And although it shows functional, it really refers to the slippers. And psychological refers to these 5-inch very attractive heels that might make someone feel good that they're wearing very attractive shoes. Okay? If you remember earlier back in our videos, we talked about needs and wants. And we could talk about needs being functional or utilitarian and wants being more psychological or hedonic. Okay? Well, once we have a need or a problem, we then search for information. We can do internal search, which is our own previous experiences and whatever we have upstairs in this 3.5-pound wet noodle between our ears. Or we can do external search. Now, back in the day, external search meant going to a store and talking to salespeople and talking to friends and family. While we can still do that in today's day and age, external search is much more about digital. I.e., what is Google going to present to us and what is popping up in our social and digital networks. Now, some other things that influence this step, this process, and this is a psychological construct called locus of control. Some of us have an internal locus of control, and some of us have a more external locus of control. This is like a worldview. You know, if you're external, you tend to think more things happen because of fate, they happen because of luck. There's more external reasons to why things happen. If you are a internal locus of control person, you feel like it happened because of me. It happened because I did it. It happened because I'm in control. It happened because I made it happen. This is an internal locus of control. And someone that has an internal locus of control is probably going to pay more attention to Google and their own social network, and someone that has more of an external locus of control might be more influenced by the people around them, information from advertisements, salespeople. There's also cultural factors here. Individualistic cultures tend to have more of an internal locus of control. Collectivist cultures tend to have a more external locus of control. It's just a cultural thing. Another thing that influences search in this step is risk, and your perceived or actual risk. Now, it could be actual risk or it could be perceived potential risk. Either way, we talk about performance, psychological, and financial. Performance is extremely straightforward. Okay? Is this product or service going to do what I expect it to do? Does this really stay cold for 12 to 16 hours as it's supposed to? Does it perform the way it's supposed to perform? Okay? These eyeglasses, these are not real. These are readers. CVS, I think I paid $15 or so for them and got a discount. Okay? I need readers. They make me feel better. Do they help me see things in small type? I sure hope so. That's performance risk. Financial risk, am I paying too much? Do I have the money to actually buy what I want to buy? I mean, every so often I get silly and I go to the Tesla website and I see how much those things cost. And then I go, you know, that is too much money given, you know, what I would have to give up in order to pay that. You know, there's financial risk there. Psychological risk is not so clear. Psychological risk is more, well, if I buy this, how do others around me think? You know, are people going to look at me differently? Or psychological risk could be more an internal pressure, i.e., you know, I really don't think I made the right decision. There's some regret. There's, you know, cognitive issues there. You know, some purchases make you think too much. That's psychological risk. So then we get to our next step and we need to evaluate the details. We could call that criteria. You know, we're going to come up with some way to rank or weight what we think is important. You know, so what is more important? Is psychological more important? Is performance more important? Is finance more important? Is warranty more important? You know, these things influence whether we pick A or B. Finally, we purchase and consume. Okay, relatively straightforward. And then there is always post-purchase behavior. Like, are you satisfied? You could be satisfied. And if you're extremely satisfied, you could be loyal. And loyal means you're going to purchase again. Satisfaction doesn't mean you're necessarily going to purchase again. You might be happy with that particular encounter, but satisfaction does not mean anything going forward. Loyalty means something going forward, i.e., they probably could count on you from purchase again. At the very least, they can count on you for positive word of mouth. Satisfaction, they can't count on you for positive word of mouth. Cognitive dissonance. This is some of that psychological risk that we talked about earlier. You know, if you're going to spend $15,000 and put a new roof on your house, there could be a lot of dissonance post-purchase if you don't like how it looks. And it's a 30 or a 40-year roof, and you just spent a lot of money, and you can't unchange that decision. Unchange, is that right? You cannot revert that decision. Gosh, cold medication makes your brain a little fuzzy. Okay? What happens is, if there is too much cognitive dissonance, we need to tell ourselves some kind of a story to make the dissonance go away, because otherwise the dissonance will eat you up. Okay? Alright. This is one slide that has an awful lot going on. So let's see if we can break it down a little bit. You see this circle in the middle, the consumer decision process? That consumer decision process is this, all 5 steps. Now, any of these 5 steps can be influenced, can be redirected by either of these 4 areas. So the marketing mix. Now, we've already talked extensively about product, price, place, promotion. Think about the evaluation of criteria. Well, if I can't get the product, there's just no way for me to logistically get it into a store at a particular time. Well, that influences my evaluation of the criteria. The price, or the discounts in the promotion, or the quality. Any of this can influence any of the 5 steps. Okay? There could be psychological factors that can influence any of the 5 steps. Your attitudes towards particular products or service. Maybe you're more green and you're staying away from additives in your food. Well, that would influence your criteria and ranking of products. And you might be buying more stuff from Trader Joe's than you would be from ShopRite. Okay? Social factors. Your family, individualistic versus collectivist cultures, just like I've talked about already. Reference groups, i.e. groups that you're a part of. Maybe you're a part of a club. Maybe you're a part of various social groups. Maybe you're a part of a gym. Well, these societal factors or social factors could influence any of these particular steps. Say you're a member of a gym, and therefore you're looking for stuff that's more health conscious. That could influence your evaluation of the criteria and your searching within any of the 5 steps. And finally, there's situational factors. The purchase situation, the shopping situation, how you feel at that given time. I mean, we all know that you do not need a shopping cart in CVS. But CVS starts putting, and Walgreens start putting shopping carts in the CVS because they know you'll put things in that you're just influenced on this spot. They have that large, gigantic counter in the beginning with all that candy and gum and the magazines and all like that. And in more than one occasion within this last month, you've gone to the counter and there's been something on the counter and you bought that too. That is a situational factor, a purchase situation factor, or a shopping situation factor. I mean, how about Amazon, where you get to checkout and they make a recommendation of something you didn't know about, and then in the checkout process, you added something to your cart in Amazon. Now, related to this conversation, we can talk about involvement. And involvement is a very, very big deal. We can talk about high involvement and low involvement. Okay, high involvement, we are probably going to go through all 5 steps because greater attention, deeper processing, it is a bigger purchase shopping cart wise. It's more of a roof as opposed to a Yeti cup. This will have strong attitudes, purchase intentions, and you will go through all 5 steps. All right. Low involvement, no. We're talking about Coca-Cola here. We're talking about McDonald's here. We're talking about buying, a flash thing that costs $10 or $12. It doesn't need as much attention. It doesn't need as much peripheral process. You don't necessarily go through all 5 steps. You might just buy. There is no cognitive dissonance. If you buy the wrong one, you made a $12 mistake. It's no big deal. It's not a $15,000 mistake that lasts 30 years. Another way of thinking about this is whether we call it extended problem solving or limited problem solving. Extended problem solving is very much high involvement. Limited problem solving is very much low involvement. Okay? When you're in low involvement, there's a lot more impulse or habit, and situational factors are more an influence there because you're not really thinking all that much. You're just kind of going on impulse. It's limited decision making. It's some impulse, it's some habit. All right? So as we shift out of B2C and consumer behavior, we need to talk about buyer behavior. And specifically, let's talk about the main differences between B2C markets and B2B markets. Well, a lot of the things that we talked about in B2C, we're still talking about humans, so they still apply. But there are other unique factors, such as the relationship with the customer, the size and the number of customers. Geography is more of an impact in B2B. The complexity of the buying process is the biggest one, and the complexity of the supply chain might be the second biggest one. So let's look at these in more detail. All right. So if we look at B2B versus B2C, in the relationship with the customers, in the consumer market, it's impersonal, and the relationship might be not as strong or as long-lasting. But in B2B, it's much more about a CRM mentality, and we invest in long-term personal business relationships. In the number and the size of the customers, consumer markets tend to have very large number of customers that buy in very, very small and less frequent quantities. In B2B, you might have fewer customers but buy very, very large amounts. We probably have strategic geographic clustering with B2B, and B2C could be anywhere there's humans. The complexity of the buying process in B2B, it is significantly more complex, and we're going to get to that in a second. And B2C is not very complex. There's fewer people. It's sometimes just a one-time purchase. Sometimes there's no relationship involved at all in buying a Coke or going to McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. The complexity of the supply chain. Really, the supply chain on the consumer side is very simple, and the consumer probably never even sees the supply chain. Where the B2B marketplace, you need to be very cognizant of the supply chain because the costs impact final price and supplier and geography. And then finally, we have demand. Consumer products have their own demand, and there's environmental factors, and there's things that the consumers decide on demand. But B2B markets, there's much more fluctuation, there's much more macro. They're a little bit less price sensitive, but I feel uncomfortable talking about elastic versus inelasticity here because it's so contingent on what exactly is being sold. Let's go another level deeper and specifically talking about buying situations and buying centers. B2B buyer behavior vary widely based on the nature of the purchase, how many people are involved, the understanding of the product being purchased, the time frame. I mean, in almost all B2C situations, you can go to Amazon or Walmart or Target or Costco. You can pretty much buy. The time frame can be zip. B2B, if you need a new locomotive, if you need a new aircraft engine, if you need a new building, if you need an entire shopping center built, the time frame, we could be talking about 8, 12, 24, 36 months out. I think the biggest difference between B2C and B2B is the concept of a buying center. See, in B2C, the buyer and the user is probably the same individual. Or at the very least, the buyer and the user is within the same family and household. When it comes to B2B, that may not be the case, and there are other people involved in the buying process. That's why we call it a buying center. Like the initiator who starts the process to buy a new product or a service may not be the user. Okay? And the initiator who starts the buying process may not be the one who ultimately decides. Right? The CEO or the COO could decide, but the CFO or the CA, accounting O, might control the process and act as a gatekeeper because they're the ones that are in charge of the financing and they're the ones that are in charge of releasing the funds in order to make this $5 million purchase. Someone might have to sign the purchase order. Someone might distribute the funds. Someone could start the process in HR, but it's operations that are actually using the product or service. Sometimes there could be an influencer, like a board member or an external consultant that helps guide the initiator, the user, and the decider in what exactly they're going to do. To summarize, B2B buying, because of the size of the purchase orders, because of the complexity that are involved in either operations or the supply chain, it's not one individual. B2C behavior is much simpler. B2B behavior is more complex because you're not dealing with just one individual. You're dealing with a center. Okay? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wrapping up both B2C and B2B buying behavior. As a final comment, if you need someone to purchase from you, if you need to explore behavior, do your best to be empathetic and see things from their perspective. Put yourself in their shoes to the best of your ability, and the more you can do that, the more successful you will be. I think that's a good wrap up. Thanks.